everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. A couple videos ago, I shared with you a little bit about my landscaping xeriscaping plan by showing you more of my land and what I'd be doing to mow less. In this video, I'd like to share with you my wildflower garden layout plans, the help that I had to do it. I needed help because it was just way too exhausting for me to probably do myself, so hired somebody. That's what this video is about. Would love to show you guys what is in store and how it all went down. Let's get to it. When Lowe's got here with the landscape timbers, they brought 2 pallets and I had them drop one of the pallets down by in front of my tiny house, that big area, and then I had them drop the other one over in the back of my acreage. We're about to lay down some wildflower gardens here. This is the first section we're gonna start, and I got some help. I hired a handyman. We're gonna knock this out together because if I would have done it by myself, I would have been exhausted. Let's get started. He brought some help, and thank goddess for that, because I don't think I would have been able to do as much work as he was doing. His wife was his helper that day. Her and I would team lift the timbers up onto his truck while he was doing it by himself. After we got 2 layers of the landscape timbers on his truck, we drove it down to the area where we were going to build the gardens. Originally, I had a plan to use the back of my golf cart to put all of the landscape timbers on, but I think the weight of the landscape timbers would have weighed down my golf cart, and I think the process would have been slower. Thank goodness that they brought the truck because it was such a huge help. When the truck got down to the first wildflower garden area, we started unloading the timbers. From a perspective point of view, the timbers were a lot smaller than the area that we were working with. I had thought that we were going to make these gardens, I think 22 different timbers. At first, I was going to start with 22 different landscape timbers for each of the gardens and make 3 gardens, but as we were laying these timbers out, we just realized that there was a lot more land to cover, so we made the gardens a little bit bigger by adding a couple more timbers. Leaving the truck in one spot and carrying the timbers from the back of the truck to the gardens was a little bit hard. They decided to get in the truck, back it up, and we moved along the way as we dropped the timbers down, and that was a lot easier because that was a lot less weight to carry. The plan in the beginning was to just simply throw the timbers down in kind of like a rough layout, and then we would go back and fix the timbers, make them straight and square and uniform, because as you're laying these timbers down, it seemed to create an uneven thing. We weren't measuring the lines together, we were just measuring the walkways in between. At the end and practically during the whole thing, we were straightening up all of the timbers that we were laying down. And as I said before, as we were dropping the timbers, we saw exactly how much room we were dealing with, so we kind of had to refigure how many landscape timbers would be in the garden. The handyman brought this cool looking tool, which had a handle with like a measurer wheel at the bottom. What he would do was walk across the walkway, measure a 5-foot walkway so that it was exactly 5 feet. He also did this with laying out the timbers and how big the gardens would be. About a week later, after laying these timbers down, I actually did purchase this tool myself because I'm going to be measuring the rocks that are going to be put down. I thought this tool would come in handy instead of using a measuring tape, because the rocks that are dropped are going to be dropped 260 feet. Using a measuring tape and trying to mark each of the spots would have been hard. Once we figured out that distance, we started dropping more landscape timbers to form the rest of the garden. And then we were able to start the next garden after we knew exactly how far the 5-foot distance would be. At first, I had him do the walkways about 4 feet, but it did not look like 4 feet, so we extended it to 5 feet, and even that didn't look like 5 feet, but it was a lot better than the 3 or 4 feet that I was going to have it, so that there's a bigger space to walk. As more timbers were dropped, we ran out of the timbers and had to go back to reload. Thank goodness that it hadn't rained, because I don't know if the truck that we were in, or even the golf cart from my original idea, if we would have used that, if that would have made it through the grass on the wet ground. Thank goodness it didn't rain, and again, thank goodness that he had that truck there because it came in handy big time. They backed the truck up as close as they could to the timbers because before the wildflower gardens even started, They were sitting out in the rain. Timbers became heavier, so the less distance that we had to carry and hoist them up onto the truck, the better. We loaded up again and took those down to the wildflower gardens and continued the process of laying them out. 3 of us working was a really great idea because I don't think I could have done this by myself. We measured out another 5-foot walkway, and quite honestly, if I took my lawnmower and just did a couple zips down these walkways, that would be all the mowing that I needed to do. The plan for these wildflower gardens and putting them down was to be less mowable, and that's pretty much what it did. We ended up making the first 2 gardens in that section 26 landscape timbers instead of the 22 that I originally wanted. And the 3rd wildflower garden, we put 20 landscape timbers because my neighbor's driveway kind of veers in towards my land. It kind of makes a curve. We couldn't extend the 3rd garden out as far as the other gardens were. So this garden was just 20 landscape timbers, which is fine. Gave me a little bit more to mow on the back side of that, but all worked out in the end. Now that these 3 landscape timber wildflower gardens were done, and we went down to the other end of the land in order to drop down the rest of the wildflower gardens. There was another pallet that was dropped down there by Lowe's, so that was convenient. We didn't have all of that hoisting of the landscape timbers from a further place. When Lowe's did drop these pallets, they did mention that the smaller area garden would have 4 less timbers, and the bigger section that is in the back of the yard, that had 4 more timbers. That was a good thing too, because it's a bigger area that we needed to cover. It had started to get dark pretty quickly. We had to lay down these gardens as quick as we could. We didn't have any light to help us lay these wildflower gardens down, so we worked as quickly as we could in the dark before it got even darker. Because of the experience in the previous wildflower gardens, we decided to make these a lot bigger so that I'd have extra landscape timbers left over for other projects around the homestead. In the back section, we did the gardens at 22 timbers each, but we made a middle garden with 16 timbers, and this gave me about 21 landscape timbers left over for those projects around the homestead. By the time we got the first garden down, I had stopped filming because it started to get really dark and we were moving way too much for me to keep walking back to the camera to get some footage. They also needed my help doing all of this. I decided to stop the filming, and I got a shot of it the next morning when it was nice and bright out at what the entire layout looked like. So there you have it. That was creating the wildflower gardens and plans for these wildflower gardens. I'm going to be purchasing a tiller, and I'm going to be tilling the middle of them and dropping perennial wildflower seeds so that they grow back every year, bigger and taller than the weeds that would have just grown naturally. My tiny house homestead dream is still going as planned, and I hope you guys are enjoying the journey. If you did and you did like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and click the notifications bell so you can receive a notification each time I post a new video, which is every Sunday. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. We drove it down to the area where we were at the end, and the 3rd landscape garden we put, don't put that. We went down to the other landscape area, don't put that. And we went down to the other part, don't put that, and click the no. They backed the truck up as far as they could to, don't put that. When Lowe's first arrived with the landscape timbers, they dropped a pallet down by the garden. Don't put that. Hold on. Whisper.